Here is your conclusion to Rosa Parks. Chapter 5, Back of the Bus. World War II ended in 1945. American soldiers returned home. Rosa's brother, Sylvester, was among them. He had been in an Army medical unit. He carried wounded soldiers on stretchers off battlefields. Sylvester had been in Europe and the South Pacific. In Europe, black soldiers were seen as heroes, just like white soldiers. But once back in the United States, black soldiers faced the same prejudices as before the war. Sylvester returned to Alabama, but found it too hard now to take the insults and threats of white racists. Now imagine, this guy had just risked his life for our country many, many times, and this is what he's coming back to. He and his family moved to Detroit, Michigan. He begged Rosa and Raymond to join him there. Rosa visited Detroit. Yes, it was amazing to see blacks sitting next to whites on public buses, but in many other ways, Detroit was not much different from Montgomery. In 1943, race riots in Detroit had killed 34 people and wounded hundreds more, black and white. Rosa and Raymond decided against moving north. Life did not get any easier for Rosa. Raymond's health was bad, so he could not earn much. Rosa's mother was living with them now too. Rosa cleaned houses for white people. She also did sewing at a tailor shop and later on at a department store. Still, Rosa continued to work for free for the NAACP. She became an advisor to its youth group. Although she and Raymond never had any of their own, Rosa loved children. She felt a special bond with them. She urged young black people to integrate the main public library in Montgomery, but every time the black students tried to check out books, they were refused. The public buses were still very much on Rosa's mind. The rules for riding the bus were complicated. There were 36 seats on each bus. The front rows were for white passengers, the back rows for blacks, the middle rows were for whites and blacks. But black people could not sit in the same row with white people. So if a white person sat down in a row, all the blacks in that row had to get up and move. Even if the back of the bus was full and the front was empty, black people could not sit there. They had to stand in the back. Rosa felt ashamed every single time she climbed aboard one of those buses, and yet she had to ride the bus to get to work. So did many other black people. A bus seat may seem like a little thing, but it was not. It represented something big. One afternoon, Rosa paid her fare and got on the Cleveland Avenue bus. The bus was very crowded. In the rear, black people stood tightly pressed together. Some had to stand in the back stairs. So Rosa got on the bus through the front door. She was moving back when the driver ordered Rosa to get off the bus. He wanted her to get back on again through the rear door. Rosa refused. Why should she get off the bus just to get on it again? The driver told her that she had better obey him. Still, Rosa did not move. The driver stopped the bus. He grabbed her by the coat and began yanking her along. Before she reached the front door, she sat down in an empty seat, a seat for white people. "Get off my bus!" the driver shouted. Finally, Rosa did, but she had made her point. In 1954, Rosa made an important new friend, Virginia Durr. Virginia was a white woman born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. Growing up, she'd been taught that white people were better than black people. However, she went to college in Massachusetts. At Wellesley College, Virginia's ideas began to change. She took classes with black students. She had meals at the same table as black students. Later, she married a lawyer named Clifford Durr, who believed in equality for black people. They eventually settled in Montgomery, where Clifford opened a law practice. Most of his clients were black. Virginia worked with black women's groups. She was also part of a prayer group. It was in this prayer group that Virginia and Rosa became friends. The new friends had much to say to each other. Virginia and Rosa talked endlessly about how to end racism. Virginia described Rosa as quiet but brave. She noticed that people had great respect for Rosa, and that when Rosa felt at ease among people, she had a good sense of humor. As close as the two women became, Rosa would never call Virginia by her first name. For 20 years, they addressed each other as Mrs. Parks and Mrs. Durr. Virginia helped Rosa attend a 10-day training workshop at a school called Highlander in Monteagle, Tennessee. It taught people to fight for workers' rights and equal rights for blacks. The students came from the north, south, east, and west. They were black and white, young and old. Many famous people, including Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., attended the school. Rosa was excited about going to Tennessee for the workshop. In July 1955, she took a leave of absence from her tailoring job. One of Virginia Durr's daughters loaned her a suitcase, and off she went. The workshop was an eye-opener for Rosa. She was 42 years old. For the first time in her life, she was living among people for whom color did not seem to matter. People forgot what color a person was. White people treated blacks with dignity and respect. Chores were divided up fairly. Rosa was not asked to wait on white people. She worked as an equal beside them. Rosa attended classes on voting rights and desegregation. She was nervous at first, but everybody was warm and friendly. She soon relaxed. She shared what it was like to be black and poor in the South. She even joined in the sing-alongs. One of the most famous civil rights songs, "We Shall Overcome," first became popular at this school. When the workshop in Tennessee ended, everyone was given an assignment. They had to figure out what might make things change in their own small towns. Rosa didn't see how anything was going to change in Montgomery, Alabama. However, her time in Tennessee had changed Rosa. She went home feeling uplifted and stronger. She wanted to keep on working for equality. It bothered Rosa even more now to ride on the segregated buses in Montgomery. It wasn't right for black people to be treated this way. Often, she walked rather than ride a bus. Things were not much better at her job at the department store. She had to smile and act politely, even when people were rude to her. She continued her work with the NAACP. She met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was the new minister at the most important black church in town, Dexter Avenue Baptist. She also met Adam Clayton Powell Jr., a black congressman from New York City. Rosa hoped both of these men could help blacks of Montgomery. On Tuesday, December 1st, 1955, Rosa left work a little before 5. She walked down to Court Square to catch the Cleveland Avenue bus. She got on and paid her fare. Only then did she realize who the driver was. It was the driver who tried to drag her off the bus 12 years before. His name was Jim Blake. Rosa said nothing and sat down in one of the seats reserved for blacks. Soon the bus filled up. There were no more seats in the white section. In Rosa Parks' My Story, Rosa described what happened after that. A white man had to stand. Blake called out to Rosa and the other black people sitting in that row, "Move, y'all, I want those 2 seats." At first, no one stirred or spoke. Blake's voice got louder. "Y'all better make it light on yourselves and let me have those seats." 2 men and a woman in Rosa's row got up. Rosa let them pass. But she did not get up. Instead, she slid over to the window. Later on, she said that she stayed seated because the more we gave in and complied, the worse they treated us. The driver marched over to Rosa. "Are you going to stand?" he snarled. "No." Rosa's voice was quiet but firm. "Well, I'm going to have you arrested," he said. "You may do that," Rosa replied. Everyone on the bus was silent. Rosa thought of her grandfather and his shotgun. She thought about all the insults over so many years. She felt as if she had the strength of her ancestors with her. She'd made her choice, and she was sticking by it. The driver went to call the police. The police car pulled up a few minutes later. The officer took Rosa off the bus. They did not handcuff her, and they did not hurt her. To Rosa, they seemed tired. They didn't want to deal with a minor crime, but they still took Rosa to the police desk at City Hall. She was booked and fingerprinted. When she asked to drink from the water fountain, she was told it was for whites only. She'd have to wait until she got to jail. Jail. All Rosa had wanted was to stay in her seat. Now she was in jail. She was led down a long, dark hall and put in a cell. She was allowed to make one phone call, so Rosa called her mother. Her mother was very worried. She wanted to know if Rosa had been beaten. Rosa said no. Raymond Parks borrowed a car and went to get Rosa. By this time, other people knew about Rosa's arrest. Rosa's bail was set at $100. Rosa and Raymond did not have that much money. Neither did Virginia and Clifford Durr. Luckily, Edgar Nixon from the NAACP was able to pay the bail. Rosa was released. The first person Rosa saw was Virginia Durr. Virginia was just happy to see that at least Rosa wasn't in handcuffs. The two friends hugged tightly. Rosa went home. She was totally worn out. She was going to be put on trial. Yet, right away, Nixon asked her to think past the trial. He wanted Rosa to consider bringing a lawsuit against the city bus people. People sue other people or businesses when they feel something unfair has been done to them. Rosa's lawsuit would ask judges to state that the seating rules in public buses were against the law. If the judges did that, then people, black or white, could sit wherever they wanted. At first, Raymond did not want her to do it. He was afraid she might be hurt or even killed. Rosa understood his fear. At the very least, she would lose her job. She might even be arrested again. And how would a trial affect her mother, who was old and sick? Rosa thought it over. Then she said, yes, she'd bring a lawsuit. Jim Crow laws had to end. She wanted help do that. Black people deserved the same freedom that white people enjoyed, and Nixon was thrilled. Rosa was the right person to bring the lawsuit. She was hardworking. She had no police record. In Rosa Parks' My Story, she said, white people couldn't point to me and say there was anything I had done to deserve such treatment except be born black. Fred Gray was one of two lawyers in Montgomery. He agreed to take on Rosa's case for free. But Rosa needed more than a good lawyer. She needed the entire black community behind her. All the black people in Montgomery, not just Rosa Parks, had to rise up against the bus companies. Chapter 8. There are many ways to protest. Sometimes people march and carry signs for their cause. Sometimes they boycott a company. That means refusing to do business with that company. Rosa's lawyers wanted all the black people in Montgomery to boycott. He wanted them to avoid riding the public buses for a single day. That might make the bus companies realize how much they needed black passengers. Without them, the bus companies would lose a lot of money. If they wanted black riders to return, they'd have to treat them better. The boycott was set for Monday, December 5th, 1955. Nixon and the others chose that date because it was the day of Rosa's trial. Thousands of handbills were run by students and professors at Alabama State College telling people about the boycott. Posters saying, "Remember, we are fighting for a cause," were hung up across the city. On Friday, the handbills were given out on the streets and in schools, businesses, barbershops, and beauty salons. They were given out in factories, too. By Friday afternoon, nearly every black person in Montgomery had a flyer. Edgar helped with the boycott. He called the city's black ministers. On Sunday, many of the black ministers in town urged churchgoers to support the boycott. Now the question was, on Monday, would black people ride the bus or not? On Monday morning, Rosa was nervous. She peered out her window. An empty bus rolled down Cleveland Avenue. Across town, on South Jackson Street, two buses went by, empty. Soon the streets were packed with black people walking to school, factories, or downtown to their jobs. They were happy to do their part. Children in black neighborhoods chased after the empty buses. "No riders today," they cried. Never before had the black community of Montgomery united in protest, and the bus companies saw how much their business depended on black riders. The boycott was a huge success. The boycott went on for a year. Blacks in Montgomery walked to school and to work. They walked to church. The leaders of the boycott organized private cars and vans to help out. Cabs to people for only 10 cents, the same price as the bus fare. All over the country, people sent money to show their support. It helped to pay for gas and other expenses. Many whites were angry. Blacks were fired from their jobs. Rosa was among them. The owner of the barbershop where Raymond worked part-time said he would fire anyone who talked about the boycott. Raymond quit in protest. Now, Rosa had to take on sewing jobs so that they could get by. Still, the black community stayed united and strong. On December 5th, 1955, Rosa's trial began. Jim Blake, the bus driver, was the lead witness. 2 white women on the bus that day were also witnesses. They lied, saying that there had been an empty seat in the back that Rosa had refused to take. Rosa did not present her side of the story to the judges. Her lawyer did not want her to. In fact, he wanted her to be found guilty. Why? Because when her case would go to a higher court, only a higher court had the power to end the bus rules. The lawyer got his wish. Within a few minutes, Rosa was found guilty and fined $14. Was this the end? No, it was the beginning. Rosa's lawyer appealed the verdict. That means he didn't think the verdict was fair. Judges in a higher court would get to hear Rosa's side of the case. Raymond had been right to fear for Rosa. She started to receive death threats over the phone. Other civil rights leaders were threatened too. Reverend King's house was bombed because he had spoken out in favor of the boycott. Now that she was out of work, Rosa was able to devote more time and energy to the boycott. She began speaking about her experiences at church and NAACP meetings. Her speeches raised money to help the bus boycott continue. She even flew to New York City to speak at Madison Square Garden. That's where the New York Knicks always lose. In New York, she met Eleanor Roosevelt, the wife of former President Franklin Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt was a longtime champion of civil rights. Yeah, do your history on the Eleanor Roosevelt. Big time on civil rights. Finally, everyone's hard work paid off. On November 13, 1956, the United States Supreme Court, the very highest court in the country, said that bus segregation was unconstitutional. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it was a victory for all mankind. He added, "At the bottom, the universe is on the side of justice." In December 1956, the black community of Montgomery was ready to get back on the bus, but this time they did not have to ride in the back. Along with a reporter and photographer from Look magazine, Rosa got on the Cleveland Avenue bus. Jim Blake, the same bus driver who had her arrested, was at the wheel. Rosa ignored him. She sat in one of the front seats, and the reporter snapped her picture. The photograph is the most famous picture ever taken of her. Rosa Parks was a heroine. Chapter 9, moving ahead. Yes, Rosa was a heroine. Her simple act of protest, refusing to give up a bus seat, is often seen as the beginning of the powerful civil rights movement of the 1960s. However, hard times were not over. Rosa received more hate mail and threatening phone calls. Raymond began to sleep with a loaded gun nearby. No one wanted to hire her. How could she and her family get by? They'd have to leave Montgomery. Rosa, Raymond, and her mother moved to Detroit, where Rosa's brother Sylvester still lived. They settled into an apartment on the west side of Detroit. Raymond attended barber shop school to get his Michigan license. Rosa found a job downtown at the Stockton Sewing Company. She made aprons and skirts. It was a quiet job, and she liked it very much. She became involved with a local church and continued working for civil rights. August 1963, Rosa attended a historic civil rights march in Washington, D.C. Oh, a book we're going to be reading. Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Rosa was thrilled by the number of people at the march. More than 200,000 people, white and black, attended. Although actress Josephine Baker spoke, Rosa was disappointed that women did not have a bigger role at the event. Still, important changes were happening. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964. It was now a law that, among other things, black people had to be treated equally at work or if they tried to buy a home. The Voting Rights Act followed in 1965. It did away with all the unfair rules that kept blacks from voting. This was the cause that Rosa had fought so hard for. With more blacks voting, black candidates began to enter politics. In 1964, John Conyers, Jr., who was from Detroit, ran for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. Rosa was active in his campaign, and when he won, she went to work for him full-time. She answered his mail, organized voter registration, and found jobs and homes for those who needed them. She did a lot of the same kind of work she did for the NAACP, but now she was paid for her efforts. By the mid-1960s, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the most famous civil rights leader in the United States. Rosa greatly admired King, but she had trouble agreeing all the time with his message of nonviolence. King did not believe in ever fighting back. When a white man punched King in the face during a speech, King did not hit him. He wanted to offer love in place of hate. I could not reach that point in my mind, Rosa said once. She was impressed by the words of another famous black leader, Malcolm X. Malcolm X encouraged blacks to be strong and to stand up for themselves. Sometimes that meant fighting for themselves. The civil rights movement grew stronger throughout the 1960s, but with growth and strength comes sorrow and pain. Black churches were bombed. In 1965, Malcolm X was killed. In 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot and killed. Rosa grieved for them all. In 1975, Rosa returned to Montgomery for the 20th anniversary of the bus boycott. Things had changed. Alabama had 15 black lawmakers in the state government. Since 1968, a black woman from Brooklyn, New York, had been a member of the U.S. Congress. Her name was Shirley Chisholm. Many cities and black mayors, black studies were offered at many colleges. The works of black artists and writers gained new support and interest. This progress made Rosa proud and happy. Her private life was not so happy. Raymond died of cancer in 1977. 3 months later, Rosa's brother died of the same disease. Her mother was old and frail and had to move to a nursing home. Rosa was alone now. She still had her job with John Conyers Jr. and her church. And in 1987, she co-founded the Rosa and Raymond Parks Institute for Self-Development in Detroit. It offered programs to help young people continue their education. Rosa had always felt a special bond with the young. As she got older, Rosa Parks' achievements were more widely recognized. In 1979, she was given the Spingarn Medal by the NAACP. In 1996, President Bill Clinton awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She received the Congressional Gold Medal in 1999. The same year, Time magazine called her one of the 20 most important people of the 20th century. She received awards, medals, and honorary degrees from all over the world. In 2000, the Rosa Parks Library and Museum opened in Montgomery. Rosa had retired in 1988 at the age of 75. Now she had more time. With the help of a writer named Jim Haskins, she wrote a book about her life. It was called Rosa Parks, My Story, and was published in 1992. She also wrote Dear Mrs. Parks, a dialogue with today's youth, a collection of letters to her from children and her answers to them. Another book she wrote, Quiet Strength, came out in 1994. And I remember this. On October 24th, 2005, Rosa died at the age of 92. Before her funeral, her coffin was brought to the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., so people could come and pay their respects to Rosa Parks. It was the first time a woman had been honored in that way. More than 4,000 people attended her funeral. She was buried in a cemetery in her adopted city of Detroit. The woman who had refused to give up her seat helped change the world with her quiet courage. Some people thought Rosa did not get up because she was tired or because she was old. Rosa just said no. These were not the reasons. I was not tired physically, she said, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, though some people have an image of me as being old then. I was 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in. The end. What a lovely lady. Good for us that we have her. That's why our country is so great. All right.